Have you ever felt like a phantom in your own life? Like the world is spinning and you're just a blur in the background? That's how it felt when she plucked the last prawn skewer from my untouched plate, turning not to me but to my superior, a glint in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Hi, I'm Nathaniel, though most call me Nate. I'm the quiet architect behind the grand designs, the one who meticulously builds the foundation while others take the credit. The guy who's always there, but never truly seen. But tonight was destined to be different. After a grueling 14 years at Thorne and Keller, I was finally spearheading a monumental client acquisition. The firm had orchestrated an extravagant gala in my honor. My name shimmered on the digital program. My face, slightly startled, was projected onto a massive banner. Strangers, their faces glowing with professional admiration, clasped my hand and offered congratulations as if my existence truly registered. Anya, my partner of 7 years, should have been my anchor, my champion. Instead, she spent the entire evening as someone else's vibrant accessory. The prawn incident, jarring as it was, wasn't even the nadir. That came much later, but the seed was sown when her hand, slender and adorned with a delicate silver ring, reached over my untouched dish. She pirouetted towards Alistair Black, my senior director, a man who'd already devoured 5 of the same skewers, and declared, "Here, you simply must try this one, Alistair. It's absolutely divine." I was mid-sentence, confiding in her about the campaign's success. She didn't so much as blink. No apology, no fleeting glance in my direction. Her gaze remained locked on Alistair, a supernova of smiles and unadulterated admiration, as if he were the sole source of light in her universe. I attempted to dismiss it. Who, after all, makes a spectacle out of cocktail seafood? But a chilling pattern began to emerge. Each time I approached, she drifted away, like oil repelling water. If she wasn't charming my colleagues, she was guffawing too loudly with the catering staff, sipping Chardonnay as if it were a potion granting ultimate liberation. Me? I stood by the illuminated sponsor banner, a decorative fixture, branded and utterly static. At one point, I caught my reflection in the vast window, not out of vanity, but to confirm I hadn't simply dissolved into the elegant backdrop. Then came the final, crushing blow. The photographer, a brisk woman with a sharp bob, announced, "All right, let's get the power couples up front." Anya stepped forward, alone, aligning herself effortlessly beside Milo Richards, my junior associate. Milo, with his impossibly perfect teeth and an ego that dwarfed his actual contributions, basked in her proximity. She even rested her hand lightly on his shoulder. From behind me, a hushed voice whispered, "Oh, are they an item?" I didn't correct them. I couldn't. My voice, it seemed, had also vanished. What happened next felt like an out-of-body experience. I gravitated towards the lavish dessert table, found a crisp napkin, and scrawled, "I'm leaving, don't follow." I folded it with precision into a tiny triangle, exactly the way she used to fold her playful notes to me. I tucked it beneath her wineglass, watching her pose, her smile radiant, oblivious to the fact she hadn't glanced my way all night. No one intercepted me as I exited. No one even registered my departure. And Anya? She didn't even realize I was gone until 2 agonizing hours later. By the time Anya's realization dawned, I was already parked in the ink-black lot of a gas station 20 minutes out, gripping the steering wheel as if it held all the answers. The radio remained silent. My phone, a dead weight in my pocket, went unchecked. I simply sat there, consumed by the gnawing question, how had I become a secondary character in my own narrative? Why had it taken a discarded prawn skewer and a forced smile to finally confront the truth? The first message buzzed through at 11:47 p.m. "Where did you go?" I stared at the screen, unblinking. Seconds later, "Nate, seriously, are you in the bathroom or something?" Then came the rapid-fire barrage. "This isn't funny. You left? What the hell, Nate?" I remained silent. I just watched the ellipses appear, vanish, and reappear, a digital manifestation of her agitated pacing. A pathetic corner of my soul should have relished her panic, but all I felt was an echoing void. Not once did she express missing me. Not once did she inquire about my well-being. Not once did she acknowledge her actions. You might be thinking I'm being overly sensitive. Perhaps I am. It's a critique I've heard before, from teachers, from colleagues, and often from Anya herself when I've dared to vocalize how invisible I feel in her presence. You overthink everything, she'd always dismiss. Not everything's about you. But what if this time, just this once, it was supposed to be? This was my event, my hard-won achievement, my name on the program, my face on the welcome slides, my blood, sweat, and sleepless nights behind the campaign that just secured the company its most lucrative contract in 5 years. And she made the entire night about everyone but me. At the stroke of midnight, her call came. I didn't answer. She called again, then a third time. Eventually, I powered down my phone and just drove. No fixed destination, no intricate plan, just the raw, desperate need for motion. I passed neon-lit diners brimming with late-night coffee drinkers, couples intertwined, their hands clasped through steamy windows. I even spotted a lone figure on a park bench, placidly eating fries, an enviable contentment etched on his face. I envied him. I envied them all. When I finally returned, our house felt like a stranger's. Her designer heels were haphazardly kicked off by the door. The cloying scent of her signature perfume still clung to the hallway. I stepped over a forgotten stack of unopened mail and walked directly to the guest room, locking the door firmly behind me. And for the first time in years, I slept alone by choice. The morning would undoubtedly bring a cascade of questions, artful excuses, perhaps even a few strategic tears. She was skilled at that when the situation demanded. But something within me had irrevocably shifted that night. Not snapped, not shattered, but rather slowly, meticulously slid into its rightful place. Like a stubborn truth I'd long suppressed had finally found its permanent dwelling. I wasn't truly angry. I was simply, profoundly tired. Tired of pleading to be seen. Tired of pretending that love could possibly feel like this. When I tentatively opened the guest room door the next morning, the unmistakable aroma of sizzling bacon assailed me like a well-laid trap. Anya never, ever cooked breakfast. Our typical mornings were a desolate landscape of cold cereal and quiet, simmering resentment. But today the griddle was active. Soft jazz music hummed from the kitchen speaker, and a saccharine, "Good morning, sleepyhead," was tossed my way before I'd even fully cleared the hallway. I stood there barefoot and unshaven, watching her expertly flip pancakes in one of my old t-shirts, as if the preceding night had been nothing but a fleeting dream, as if she hadn't utterly forsaken me at my own triumphant event, as if she hadn't spent the entire evening fawning over colleagues whose names she couldn't even recall last week. I uttered not a single word. I simply stared. "Oh, come on, don't be so dramatic," she chirped, plating the food with a theatrical flourish. "I was merely trying to help you network." That line, the insidious phrase she invariably deployed whenever I dared to suggest she monopolized every room we entered, whenever I confided that I felt utterly erased in crowds, reduced to a mere placeholder until she located someone more captivating to engage. "Networking," I echoed, my voice barely a whisper as I slid into a chair. "So, that's what we're calling it now." She paused for a fraction of a second. Her back stiffened almost imperceptibly, just enough to confirm that, yes, she understood my implication perfectly. But instead of addressing it, she maintained her unnervingly light tone. "You know how good I am with people. I just thought you'd appreciate me making a good impression." I fixated on the pancakes. Perfectly golden. A flawless performance on a plate. "You didn't even notice I left." That made her turn, not with anger yet, but with a palpable defensiveness. "Of course I noticed. Don't be ridiculous." "When?" I pressed. "Be honest. What time did you actually realize I was gone?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She took a slow, deliberate breath. "Around maybe 11? I was looking for you and Milo said you'd left. I just thought you stepped out for some air." "Milo," I mumbled. Of course Milo noticed. That comment stung her pride. She crossed her arms, the mask beginning to fray. Why are you acting like I committed a crime? You're always so touchy. I can't even talk to people without you turning it into some dramatic guilt trip. There's a difference between talking and pretending I don't exist, I said, finally meeting her eyes. Last night wasn't a one-off. It's who you become. You perform for strangers and forget the man who drove you there. She rolled her eyes with a practiced dismissiveness. Oh, please. You abandoned me at the event, Nate. You stormed off like a child and didn't even answer your phone. I stood up slowly, my appetite completely gone. Because I realized I could vanish and no one would truly care. Not even you. That realization hung heavy in the air. That should terrify you, Anya, I said, my voice low and steady. But it doesn't, does it? She blinked. For the first time, her polished composure fractured. Just a sliver. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. That's the problem, I whispered, turning back towards the guest room. You never mean to, but it always ends up this way. The door clicked shut behind me, leaving her alone in the meticulously crafted kitchen. I sat on the edge of the bed, the uncomfortable question echoing in the silent room. When exactly did I stop being her partner and become merely a prop? And somewhere, deep down, I suspected she was just beginning to ask herself the same devastating question. By Sunday afternoon, the silence between us had solidified into something far heavier than mere anger. It was avoidance, thinly veiled as strained politeness. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, tiptoeing as if the very floorboards were made of fragile glass. And I, in turn, meticulously pretended not to notice every forced smile, every hollow, "Do you need anything?" She tossed my way. I couldn't respond, couldn't bring myself to. There was something raw and unraveling inside me. Like my soul was finally catching up to the stark truth my eyes had witnessed, a version of Anya that had no need for me, perhaps never truly did. She ventured out for a quick coffee run around 2. That's when my phone buzzed. Not her phone, mind you, mine. Let me be unequivocally clear, I wasn't snooping. The notification simply popped up on the home screen of my laptop, which remained innocently connected to our shared cloud account. It was from Milo. Yes, the same Milo she'd spent the better part of my work event glued to. The message read, "You were amazing the other night. Can't stop thinking about what you said." What she said. I stared at the message, each word alien, foreign, as if written in an unknown script. There was no preceding context, no playful emojis, no conversational thread leading up to it. Just that solitary line, floating like irresistible bait in crystal clear water. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I knew I shouldn't open the full thread. I knew it wasn't intended for my eyes. But curiosity, a ravenous beast, had already dragged me across the line. I clicked. There were only a handful of messages. Milo had texted her the following day too. Still thinking about our talk. Hope you're okay, and I'm here if things keep getting worse between you two. My stomach plummeted. This wasn't professional. This wasn't friendly. This certainly wasn't about networking. There was no explicit mention of anything physical, no scandalous photos, no dramatic declarations of love. But the tone, that tone, was unmistakably intimate, intensely confessional, almost possessive, as if she'd been unloading her frustrations about me onto him, as if she'd been carefully planting seeds for something far beyond mere emotional support. The most agonizing part? Her replies had been meticulously deleted. Only his words remained, dangling like a half-severed rope from a fire I hadn't even known was raging. I slammed the laptop shut and sat in stunned silence, my hands trembling uncontrollably. I wasn't the type to leap to conclusions. I wasn't wired for aggressive confrontation. But something about this quiet, insidious betrayal, made my chest cave in. Not because I definitively believed she was having an affair, but because I realized she had found solace, comfort, and an outlet for her grievances. Somewhere else, and she hadn't even bothered to conceal the breadcrumbs. When she returned, 2 iced lattes in hand, that familiar, brittle cheerfulness in her voice, I didn't utter a sound. I didn't hurl the laptop across the room or demand immediate answers. I simply looked at her, truly looked, and saw a woman who had emotionally packed her bags long before I ever stepped out of that company gala. She placed my coffee on the table, glanced at me and frowned. "You okay? You look lost in thought." I managed the smallest nod I could muster. "Yeah, just thinking." She didn't press. Of course, she didn't. I stared at the condensation beating on the cup, wondering how long it would take her to notice I hadn't taken a single sip, wondering what secrets she had poured out to Milo that night, wondering when exactly I stopped being the man she came home to and started being the man she kept secrets from. But most of all, I wondered how much longer I could keep pretending not to see it all. The following few days unfolded like a bizarre, poorly rehearsed play I couldn't tear myself away from. A performance where the actors repeatedly fumbled their lines, yet desperately clung to the illusion that everything was perfectly fine. Anya never once brought up the event again. Not a single word about how she'd dissolved into the crowd or how I'd quietly slipped away unnoticed. No apology, no confrontation, just this strained, forced rhythm of normalcy. Midday, she'd text mundane updates like, "Don't forget we need eggs," or "What do you want for dinner?" As if we hadn't both silently agreed to sweep the entire agonizing episode under the thickest rug imaginable. But I couldn't erase Milo's text. It gnawed at me, louder than any of Anya's empty pleasantries. And the more she sidestepped the subject, the more I began to discern unsettling patterns. Things I dismissed before. The almost imperceptible way she'd lock her phone the instant I entered a room. Her new habit of taking calls on the small balcony, even on chilly evenings. How her late meetings started occurring with alarming frequency, always on Tuesdays. I didn't want to accuse her. I certainly didn't want to ignite a screaming match. I wanted the truth to simply, cleanly fall into my lap, like a forgotten receipt or a misplaced voicemail. But it never does it? So I decided to test her. Nothing overtly dramatic, no elaborate scheme or hidden cameras, just something subtly revealing. I informed her I had an important work dinner on Thursday night with a visiting client, implying I'd be out late, possibly past midnight. Her reaction was anticlimactic, to say the least. She barely glanced up from her phone. "Okay, want me to leave some food out?" That was it. No flicker of curiosity, no follow-up questions, just the quiet, almost palpable freedom of someone utterly unburdened by her partner's absence. And perhaps it's pathetic, but I had genuinely expected something more. A hint of jealousy, a spark of concern, even a flicker of suspicion. But nothing. Absolutely nothing. So on Thursday night, I left the house clad in my slacks and a pressed dress shirt, just as I'd claimed. Except instead of heading to a client dinner, I drove 3 blocks down, parked discreetly near a shuttered bookstore, and sat in my car in the profound dark, the engine silent. I remained there from 6:45 p.m. until 11:10 p.m., simply watching the clock, watching my phone. She didn't text, not once. When I finally returned home, slipping inside as silently as possible, the living room lights were off, but a soft, familiar glow emanated from her side of the bed, illuminating a sliver of the hallway. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I crept down the hall, slow and silent, and then I heard it. Her voice soft, not quite a whisper, but too gentle, too intimate to be casual. "I just don't know how much longer I can keep pretending," she murmured. A pause. Then, "No, he hasn't said anything. It's like he's just given up." I felt like I'd swallowed a jagged nail. My foot froze mid-stride. I couldn't discern the other voice. She was likely on speakerphone or wearing headphones. But I didn't need to hear it. I knew with a sickening certainty exactly who it was. Milo. I didn't go in. I slowly backed away, retreated to the living room couch, and lay down, my coat still on. I stared at the ceiling for hours, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I replayed all the times I'd begged her to talk to me, to confess if she was unhappy, to see me again. And all along, she had been speaking. Just not to me. That night, I didn't shed a single tear. I didn't shout. I didn't even move. I simply lay there wondering how two people could inhabit the same home, breathe the same air, and yet exist in entirely different universes. I was her partner, her husband, but she had stopped being my wife a very long time ago. I typically don't wake before Anya. She's always been the early riser, performing her yoga stretches before the mirror, brewing coffee first thing, a gentle hum of a podcast about productivity or mindset wafting from the kitchen. But that morning I was already awake, perched on the edge of the living room couch, fully dressed, with no intention of going anywhere. I hadn't slept. I hadn't moved much either. I'd simply sat there all night, replaying her voice in my head. Her words, that quiet confession delivered to someone who wasn't me. I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending. It wasn't merely the words that shattered me. It was the effortless way she uttered them, as if they were not new, as if she had rehearsed them a dozen times before they ever left her lips. When she finally walked into the kitchen that morning, she jumped slightly upon seeing me. She hadn't expected me to be awake, let alone dressed. I watched her eyes scan the room, almost imperceptibly, as if calculating her next move. Then that familiar, taut, forced smile I had come to despise. "Didn't hear you come in last night," she said, opening the cabinet with an air of casualness that felt utterly performative. "How was dinner?" There it was, the test, the carefully constructed lie I'd fed her, now tossed back like a baited hook. I didn't blink. It got canceled. I came home early. Her hand froze for a second on the coffee tin, a barely discernible tremor, but I caught it. "Oh," she said, her tone too casual. "I must have been asleep." I stood up and walked over to the kitchen island, watching her pour water into the kettle as if we were polite strangers at a hotel breakfast. My voice emerged quieter than I'd anticipated. "Who were you talking to last night?" She paused again. "Not long, but long enough." "What do you mean?" I pressed. "In the bedroom, around 11?" She still didn't turn around. "Just a friend. Couldn't sleep." I leaned on the counter. "Milo." That made her flinch. Just slightly, a shoulder twitch, a fractional pause in her stirring. "Why would you think that?" she asked, finally turning to face me, her eyes carefully neutral. "Because I heard you, because I read the message, because I saw the way you looked at him the night I stood alone at my own event, watching you become someone else." But I didn't unleash any of that. Instead, I met her gaze and said simply, "You talk to him more than you talk to me." Anya let out a slow, deliberate breath, as if she'd been holding it for an eternity. "We're just friends. He listens, that's all." I nodded slowly. "And me?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. That silence was everything. It was the death rattle of a marriage stretched so thin it had become utterly invisible. "I don't want to fight," she whispered after a moment, her voice thin and reedy. "I'm just tired, and I don't know how to fix whatever this is anymore." That's when it hit me. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't seeking to rebuild. She was merely attempting to soften the inevitable landing. I pushed off the counter, walked past her, and grabbed my keys. Her voice followed me, weak and unsure. "Where are you going?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I need to be somewhere I'm not constantly erased." And with that, I stepped out the door. Not forever, not yet, but for the very first time I left without telling her when or if I'd be back. I had no intention of staying out overnight. I hadn't even packed a bag. I just drove, no music, no specific direction, no thought beyond creating distance between myself and that house. Somewhere along the way, I found myself parked outside an old motel, a relic I hadn't seen since my college days. It was the kind of place that still boasted actual, clunky metal keys and carried a faint, nostalgic scent of lemon cleaner mixed with old pillows. I paid in cash, ignored the receptionist's mildly raised eyebrow, and collapsed onto the lumpy mattress without even bothering to pull back the ancient blanket. It wasn't the betrayal, not entirely, that had broken me. It was the quiet, agonizing unraveling of someone I used to know with such profound intimacy. Anya used to grip my hand tightly when I was nervous in public. She used to laugh, a genuine, hearty sound, at my terrible jokes, even when no one else did. Once, she'd even sent me a video of herself singing Happy Birthday while clumsily holding a cupcake in each hand because I'd confessed to feeling particularly invisible that week. And now I had to concoct elaborate lies about business dinners just to see if she'd even notice my absence. What does it take for someone to truly see you? The next morning I woke before the sun. I opened my phone and stared at the blank screen for a long while. No missed calls, no messages, just the time slowly, painfully crawling past 6 a.m., as if it understood I wasn't quite ready for the day to begin. Then at 6:11, her name finally appeared. A single message, sterile and cutting. Where are you? Not, are you okay? Or please come home. Just those three stark words. I didn't respond. Couldn't. I simply stared at the motel ceiling, at the cracked paint on the light fixture directly above me, wondering if this was the precise moment I finally had to admit that whatever we once shared, it had perished a very long time ago. Eventually I drove back, not because I yearned to, but because a stubborn, pathetic part of me still clung to the hope that she might be standing there, panicked, eyes red-rimmed, arms outstretched, confessing her mistake, whispering that she missed me, that she was truly sorry. But when I unlocked the door, she wasn't there. The kitchen was unnervingly clean. Too clean. The coffee pot was empty. Her favorite shoes were gone. Her elegant handbag, too. No note. No calls. I placed my keys gently on the counter and walked into the bedroom. That's when I saw it. Not a message from her. A piece of paper. The one I'd inadvertently left behind on the nightstand when I'd rushed out. A page torn from an old journal of mine. Something I had never intended for her eyes. I had scribbled on it the night after the work event, half delirious from the humiliation and the profound hurt. Just a thought. If she can't see me now, she never will. She had underlined that exact sentence. Then next to it, she had scrawled a single word in her sharp, hurried handwriting. Maybe that single word spoke volumes. It wasn't a denial. It wasn't an expression of regret. It was a confirmation, wrapped in hesitant uncertainty. Maybe I was right. Maybe she couldn't see me. Maybe she never did. I stood there clutching that note, reading it over and over until its meaning stopped shifting, finally solidifying into undeniable truth. She read it. She understood it. And she still left. And for the first time since this agonizing ordeal began, I felt something entirely unfamiliar. Clarity. I didn't hear from Anya again that day, nor the day after. There was no dramatic apology, no tearful confession at the door. She didn't return home that night, nor the next. And strangely, that profound silence, the very same silence that once felt like a relentless punishment, slowly, miraculously, began to feel like peace. I remained in the house for a few days, not because I harbored any hope of her return, but because I desperately needed to understand what I wanted if she didn't. And the more I sat with it, the more I grasped a truth no one ever teaches you about marriage. Sometimes the relationship doesn't expire with a cataclysmic fight. Sometimes it simply dissolves quietly into absence. And when it does, that's not failure. That's truth. Curdy, here's what no one tells you about true endings. They are often the beginning. I contacted a lawyer the following Monday, not out of anger, but because I finally felt honest enough with myself to admit that we were no longer building anything together. Anya and I had devolved into two people with overlapping routines, not a shared life. And no amount of forced couples brunches or obligatory anniversary dinners was ever going to alter that fundamental truth. When she finally texted 3 days later, her message was short, devoid of pretense. I think you're right. I haven't seen you in a long time. Maybe it's time we both stop pretending. There was no venom in it, just a weary, exhausted honesty. And oddly, I found myself respecting her for that. We didn't scream. We didn't break things. We just stopped lying to each other. And more importantly, to ourselves. Weeks passed. The divorce process began, quiet and clean. And slowly, subtly, I started noticing things again. The way the morning sunlight illuminated the old armchair I'd rarely used. The comforting aroma of coffee brewing. My coffee, the kind I genuinely liked. The profound, liberating sensation of finally being able to breathe in my own space. I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't bitter. I was, astonishingly, free. And one evening, months later, I found myself sitting at a small, intimate open mic night downtown. Not because someone had dragged me there, but because I genuinely wanted to go. I listened intently as strangers sang raw, heartfelt songs born of heartbreak, of healing, of unexpected joy. And when the final note faded, I clapped so hard my hands ached. A woman beside me, her eyes twinkling, laughed and said, "You clap like you know what they've been through." I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "Maybe I do," I replied. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was a moment, and that after so many empty years was more than enough.